Trigger warning. As the title suggests, in this video, I will be talking about pro-shipping and pro-shippers. The topic of pro-shipping is a very volatile one and often includes other potentially triggering or uncomfortable topics. I will be making sure to discuss these topics in a way that is safe for work, mature, and uses non-slang terminology. However, if any of the topics displayed on screen now have the potential to trigger you or make you feel upset or unsafe, please click away from the video now. So, I have a feeling that I know what your first instinct is going to be upon clicking on this video. Why am I, KijiCon, an Animal Jam YouTuber, going to be talking about pro-shipping, a fandom-wide sort of discussion that happens all across the internet? And why am I, KijiCon, a creator who makes content generally for all audiences, going to be talking about pro-shipping, a topic that can sometimes lend itself to more mature discussions? Well, that would be because, unfortunately, as of late, the topic of pro-shipping has been brought up on Animal Jam Instagram. Quite a bit, actually. And, of course, while I may not be a pro-shipper myself, in fact, I honestly don't ship characters at all. I don't really see the point in doing so, given the fact that I have my own OCs to ship to my heart's content. I still think this is an important discussion, given the fact of how it genuinely does impact many lives, both online and off. And this topic tends to be so volatile that on Instagram, I saw people taking this whole back and forth so far as to accuse people of horrifying things and to go out and harass people and send death threats, and also some misinformation was spread here and there. But regardless, I just want to talk about the topic as a whole in a way that is not taking either side, more so being an informative, middle of the ground kind of deal. I, again, am not a pro shipper. I don't ship at all. It is not my thing. I am not interested. And in general, I feel kind of weird about the whole idea of shipping characters as a whole, but in my opinion, generally, as long as you're not hurting real people, as long as you're not shipping real people, whatever floats your boat, these characters aren't real. But it's a lot more of a nuanced conversation than that, so I'm going to be delving into both sides of the argument and essentially where they come to meet in the middle, as well as maybe a tiny bit of my own opinion and the big no's on both sides, at least for me. I'm also going to be clearing up some misinformation about certain terminology, where the word comes from, definitions, etc., etc., etc. And then I'm going to be, covering what actually happened on Instagram because, that's the whole point of the video. And where else to start than what is pro-shipping? What is a pro-shipper? And this is, the part of the video where I pop up a definition on screen and read it off to you. But even the Urban Dictionary can't seem to agree what pro-shipping is. And that's because depending on who you ask, everybody is going to give you a different answer as to what a pro-shipper is. The same way, kind of, but on a different level as to how if you ask any furry, every single furry would have a different answer to you as to what being a furry means. Pro-shipping is a self-identity, which means that people who pro-ship and who are pro-shippers identify themselves as pro-shippers. On the other hand of things, people who are anti-pro-shipping define themselves as anti-shippers. Though in my personal research, I see that perhaps more anti-shippers have been given the label anti-shippers by pro-shippers as a sort of, you're anti-expression, than anti-shippers actually naming themselves to be anti-shippers. Most people who are anti-pro-ship just tend to stay away from the whole discussion as a whole and, just put pro-ship DNI in their bio or whatever. But to put it as simple as physically possible, pro-shipping are people who are pro-shipping. In other words, people who are for freedom of expression of shipping or creating fictional relationships between fictional characters. For example, if I were to ship Mario and Princess Daisy and say that they are a loving couple and I write fan fiction about them or draw fan art of them, that would be a ship. And I'm pretty sure that most people in any fandom ever know what a ship is. But what differentiates a normal ship from a pro-ship? From what I've been able to gather, pro-shipping is generally the ideology that people should be free to ship whatever they want, regardless as to how problematic or potentially mature or socially unacceptable said ship is. So this would mean ships between minors and adults, ships between people and animals, ships between brothers. For example, if I were to ship Mario and Luigi together, that would be a pro-ship because they are related. And for the purposes of this video, the pro-ships that I will be using as examples are going to be ones that are far-fetched and to the point of being potentially ironic or hilarious. But that is not often the case with pro-shipping. Pro-shipping can also go to the point of creating ships in which the relationships are abusive or very toxic, such as an adult taking advantage of a minor for a ship, and quote-unquote dark ships in which bad things or horrifying things happen. And that is where the contention begins, because if pro-shipping was simply a matter of, you ship what you want to ship, I ship what I want to ship, like if I ship Mario with Princess Daisy, despite Mario canonically being with Peach, I'm free to ship that, that's my ideology, then pro-ship wouldn't be as contested as it is. The issue that most people have with pro-shipping is the fact that many pro-shippers identify with or choose to ship dark ships, such as what I mentioned previously, minor x adult, human x animal, or sibling x sibling, or adult x child. Now, the most widespread argument against pro-shipping, which I can to some extent get behind, is the idea that creating these ships that would in real life be very illegal helps to normalize these abusive dynamics in the real world, and that people who may be more susceptible to having their opinions swayed or being manipulated into doing these things in real life may actually take action. For example, if a minor, gets a hold of pro-shipping content in which there is an adult and a child being shipped, and it is portrayed in a manner that is healthy or desirable, this minor will be more susceptible to grooming and being taken advantage of by real-life adults, because by reading this fictional content, they consider it to be okay. On the other hand of things, pro-shippers believe this not to be true whatsoever. They often hold the argument that shipping does not impact real life, fiction does not impact real life, and often the argument of comparing it to violent video games not impacting real life is brought up. And I think that this is a bit of a straw man, specifically because a lot of these arguments, including both sides of this specific argument, requires a lot of nuance. For example, if I were to show these pro-shipping fanfictions to adults are not as susceptible to have their minds swayed. Adults are more clear in recognizing the boundaries between fiction and reality. In a similar way, if I were to raise my very young children on GTA 5, there's going to be a lot bigger of a chance that these children are going to be going around using profanity or hurting people or not having the general idea of empathy. The idea that video games do not impact reality is true to some extent. It depends on who is being influenced by it and how their beliefs that fiction is different from reality are being reinforced. For example, growing up, I was allowed to play some violent video games. However, the distinction between fiction and reality was always made very clear to me. But a young minor who may not have those positive influences in her life may not have that distinction, and thereby the lines may be blurred. So personally, I would agree that pro-shipping content, especially dark shipping content, should not be used around minors whatsoever. In general, I think that a lot of shipping probably isn't great for minor spaces, given that a lot of the times shipping does lend itself to NSFW and explicit content, which minors should not be engaged in the first place. But what about if, this pro-ship content was kept to 18+ spaces? If only adults were allowed to engage in this stuff, similar to how only adults should be engaging in Rule 34 content? I think that would bring a pretty different argument. Sure, it's really weird, and I personally don't understand the appeal to shipping Ratatouille with the human whose head he's on, but I don't think that any grown man out there is going to see Ratatouille and the human smooching and think that it's okay to smooch his real-life rat. Unless, of course, this person already has some predisposition to the philia in question. And as somebody who has been in fandom spaces for long before I turned 18, I can agree and say that there is a very decently large chunk of pro-shippers who do engage in this sort of stuff in the presence of minors, be it on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram, and it does get into the eyes of minors. I have seen that stuff before I've turned 18. And for those of you out there who are specifically going after pro-shippers who are promoting this stuff to their minor audience, more power to you, because I do think that this should be called out, and I do think that you should be saying, hey, this isn't okay. However, at the same time, this does not mean that sending death threats are okay. Even if somebody is actively hurting others, intentionally, if somebody's going out of their way to intentionally use pro-ship content to allure to children in order to change their perspective, sending death threats is not the right way to go about it. And I can understand that you're sitting there saying, wow, Kijikon, are you really going to defend these sort of people? And the answer is no. This is also in defense of minors. An unfortunate thing is that a lot of pro-ship content is getting shared with minors because the people creating it are often minors. And regardless as to what these minors are doing, I don't think that sending death threats to minors is ever okay. And even if the pro-shipper you are sending death threats or harassment to isn't a minor, who do you think's going to see that? Not just the pro-shipper. Minors will probably see that too, and as I said previously, minors are more susceptible to having their perspective swayed, and so if they are constantly being introduced to an environment where doxing and sending death threats to people you don't agree with is okay, I'm sure you can see where that unfortunately starts to go south. And unfortunately, this is definitely not helped by another aspect of pro-shipping. That is the fact that many pro-shippers claim that pro-shipping is a coping mechanism for things that they have experienced in real life. And anti-shippers often refer to that as being a very bad self-destructive means of coping. And I feel a bit conflicted with that, actually. I have my own personal experiences with mental health conditions and trauma, and a large way that I cope with my mental health issues is through my art. And most of my art is, purely wholesome and cute, like my otter jumping into a river, or my Splatoon characters doing a little victory pose together. But sometimes when I'm feeling particularly stressed out, I may draw things that are violent or bloody. Usually there's no context behind it, it's just a graphic, aggressive scene that I use to get my internal turmoil out onto paper. But when I was in high school and middle school, teachers would see this, adults would see this, and they'd think, oh, that's scary, that's concerning, this must be detrimental to their health. And for a while, I had a therapist, and these drawings were taken to my therapist, and do you want to know what my therapist told me? She told me to keep doing them, because it was better for me to seek out this violence on paper than to potentially bring harm to myself or others. And I do believe that to an extent the same could apply to pro-shippers, especially those pro-shippers who may have been groomed by real adults in their real life. There is a psychological phenomenon that has been studied multiple times in the past, wherein which somebody is traumatized in a sensual manner, and as a result they may form intimate fantasies of said unfortunate occurrence reoccurring. And some people may engage in that in a form of consensual roleplay or just fantasies that they keep in their head. But they would never really want that to happen again. However, if somebody is in a emotionally compromised state, they may unfortunately be a lot more prone to getting into these unfortunate relationships again, which is why perhaps it could be better for them to express these sort of emotions through fictional characters who can't really be hurt. If I write a fan fiction about Mario smooching Luigi, that doesn't impact any real brothers, and it can be disturbing, and I agree, the idea very much grosses me out, but for other people, if that is their coping mechanism and it is working for them, you can't speak for them. Even if you are an ex-pro-shipper who have done some of that kind of stuff in the past, and that you found for yourself it was very bad, and it put you in a bad mental space, and it made your mental health worse. That isn't the case for everyone. Not everyone who draws graphic vent art is going to have that as a means to benefit them in a good way. For some people that may be detrimental. To visualize and show these dark thoughts may make them remember them and bring them back into their mind. But for others, it could be a way to let go of it. No coping mechanism works for everyone. And in this particular case, given the content and given the maturity level of it, I stand strong with the idea that this should not be in minor spaces. But adults doing consensual things and not hurting any real people, and distinguishing the difference between reality and fiction. Let them do what adults do by themselves. And of course the argument can be made, well, they could keep that to themselves, they don't have to post that online, and that's kind of a thought you should keep in your head. I wouldn't die to say that. Sometimes it helps to find community with others who have similar coping mechanisms to yourself, to help each other recover and help each other cope with what's going on. That's why there are support groups for people, where they can find people who've been through similar things or who cope in similar ways to help one another. And I think that sort of community is something that pro-shippers could use. But unfortunately, that isn't always the case. I'd say that what is probably the biggest danger of pro-shipping is the kind of environment that it creates. While I may be clear in saying that this isn't the kind of stuff that should happen around children, even in adult spaces, people will push the line, people will blur the line. For example, in the LGBTQ community, we are accepting for anyone who loves anyone, given that everyone in the relationship are mature, conscious, consenting adults. But some people will push that line. There are people out there who have called themselves maps, who have tried to weasel their way into the LGBTQ community because that's where they can blend in. There are furries out there who have tried to weasel their way into the furry community with their uncomfortable, traumatizing attachment to animals, who try to use the furry community as a mask. you'll find more predators in jobs where they have access to children, which is why you often find pediatric physicians or teachers being outed as being those horrible people, because they have access to children. And unfortunately, the same thing applies to pro-shipping. When people are towing the line in the pro-shipping community, people who are genuinely disgusting and distasteful use that community as a means to hide themselves away. And while I may not personally be comfortable with pro-shipping, I think that there should be a grander focus on the people who are actually causing active harm towards actual kids. Not to say that you can't focus on two issues at the same time, and not to say that maybe there are better coping mechanisms out there, but at the end of the day, you're arguing with somebody on the internet. And at the end of the day, you are probably hurting yourself more than you're hurting them. And you can always, and I encourage this, if a community makes you uncomfortable, make that clear, set a boundary. I personally, would put, for my personal comfort, pro-shippers DNI in my bio. Or maybe if you notice that somebody's following you and making pro-ship content, block them. That's the easiest way to get that stuff away from yourself and from your minor viewers or your children content creators who you're friends with. The best way to get rid of it is to not engage with it, but if you need to report it, if it's something that is reportable and illegal, report their content to have it taken down, block them, and that's it. Showing minors where to find the gross stuff is going to show the minors the gross stuff. You can take action without making death threats, without making people's lives worse. And I feel like there are unfortunate issues on both sides of the coin here. Like, another thing is I have seen so many people outright claiming and accusing people who are pro-ship as being either predators, interested in children, or interested in animals, even though these people have outwardly say they have absolutely zero interest in these kind of things in real life, which makes sense. I mean, if you're a furry and you think that furry men are hot, it's not like you're going to seek out a werewolf in real life. I mean, I hate to break it to you guys, you monster lovers, monsters aren't real. And not all fictional interests can translate to real life. That's just kind of how the internet stuff kind of works. So if anybody out there has been accusing people of being these sort of philic enjoyers with no, basis, that's kind of sad. And I unfortunately did see that a few times on Instagram with the recent uprisal of talking about pro-shipping after somebody was outed for being a pro-shipper on Instagram, which I'm not going to get wholly into their story because, quite frankly, they have been harassed a lot, and I don't know the full story, and I can never know the full story because I was not there, and I could take their word for it, and I could take the words of people against them for it, but I was not there, and I will not be taking a stance on an argument I was not present for and an argument that I was not involved with. All I aim to do is inform. That being said, there are a couple things that I have researched to find are complete misinformation that were spread during this online kerfuffle on Instagram. For starters, dead dove do not eat. People were claiming that Dead Doves Do Not Eat is a fan fiction that involves a wide variety of horrifying and graphic content, from enjoying animals to enjoying children to enjoying the dead. And that is so wrong on so many levels. Like, it took me one Google search to find out what that means. Dead Dove Do Not Eat refers to a scene in the show Arrested Development in which a character finds a brown paper bag in the freezer on which it says Dead Dove Do Not Eat. And he opens the bag, and what does he expect to find? Who knows, but you want to know what he does find? A dead dove. What did he expect?
No, I don't know what I expected.
Now, this scene was an example of somebody opening a clearly labeled bag and somehow being surprised that what they found inside was the same thing that was clearly labeled on the package. From this episode, the term Dead Dove Do Not Eat became a label for all sorts of things, posts, fan fictions, videos, in which the hashtag Dead Dove Do Not Eat, or an emoji combo of a coffin with a dove, are used essentially to tell people reading the fanfic, watching the video, opening the post, to be aware that this post is exactly what it says in the package. So, for example, if you read a fanfiction in which the tags tell you that Luigi and Garfield have a baby, and you are surprised that in the fanfiction you're reading that Luigi and Garfield have a baby, it's a way of telling you, well, what did you expect? If you don't like it, don't read it. It is sort of used as a means through which to give your fanfiction or your post a trigger warning, kind of without the word trigger warning. It's a fandom term, but has become very associated with the pro-shipping community due to its wide use in pro-shipping fanfiction, in which a, paraphilic ship occurs, and it will tell you, dead dove, do not eat, don't read this fanfiction where the Mario Brothers get together if you don't want to read a fanfiction in which the Mario Brothers get together. And I don't think the term in itself is really problematic. If anything, it's just same as like a fandom term. I don't think it's a big deal. But obviously the contents of some of these fanfictions are incredibly disturbing. And I do think there should be some limitations as to what is and isn't okay. Obviously, don't ship real people, because at that point it isn't fictional and you are negatively impacting real people, whether you like it or not. Additionally, as I said, don't spread this kind of stuff in minor spaces. You can definitely leave minors vulnerable to be grooming, even if you aren't the person attempting to groom yourself. Minors are susceptible, and people may argue, hell, it's not my responsibility to parent the minors. It's not my job. Parents need to monitor children's access to the internet. And you're not wrong. It shouldn't be your job to monitor children's access to the internet. But the unfortunate reality is that crappy parents exist. There are parents out there who are going to give their children unrestricted access to the internet. But that isn't okay. That doesn't make it okay for you to leave this stuff open and out for children to just find. Just as it wouldn't be okay for me to spread my vent art out there for my audience to find. From what I've been able to gather, most, and I mean most because there are some pretty awful people in the pro-shipping community, as there are in any community, most pro-shippers' whole gig, their whole idea isn't, ooh woo, I love shipping minors and adults, I think it's so kawaii-chan! Usually it's more of a matter of free expression, which unfortunately leads to another thing that I wanted to talk about. Pairs, or, maps with a new coat of paint. Part of the reason why pro-shipping blew up in the Animal Jam community is because a particular community member was using the term pro-expression, anti-repression. And that is a term that abbreviated is pairs, P-E-A-R. And this is a phrase often used by maps or predators in order to be used as a dog whistle to identify one another. And this particular Animal Jam user using that phrase self-identified as a pro-shipper. And I personally had never heard of the term, and I've never heard of the phrase, and I didn't know what it was. So I decided to do my own research. And I found initially what absolutely everybody else found, and that was pages upon pages of people saying that the terminology of pair was being used as a dog whistle between maps to identify one another and to find solidarity in one another. And using the excuse of free expression in order to promote predator ideology. But then I dug a little deeper and I went on some other social media websites and I was just Googling the phrase paired alongside the pair emoji, and I found some other things, actually. There was a surprising amount of pro-shippers, or some even non-pro-shippers, who were using the phrase, pro-expression, anti-repression, and the pair emoji as a means through which to be a lot more literal in being, hey, I am pro-expression, I'm pro-being yourself, and I'm anti-repression, I'm anti being forced into boxes, cringe is dead kind of stuff. And unfortunately, it is the misuse of terminology that often can lead to some confusion. Sometimes people use phrases and people use labels without knowing fully what they mean. And I don't know for sure. Again, I don't know the full story, I don't know both sides of the story, and I can't read minds. But I did speak with the person in question on Instagram recently, and they aren't interested in kids. They aren't interested in animals. They are simply interested in dark fiction and writing questionable fiction, and do very much recognize the distinction between fiction and reality. And I don't think that in itself is a crime, especially if they are very much not interested in the real world with this stuff. The biggest fault that I can give them is misusing terminology used by the wrong people, not recognizing its impact, And unfortunately, the worst of all, sharing the fact that they are a pro shipper with an Animal Jam group chat. I don't know what this group chat was. I don't know how many of these group chat members were children, how many of them were adults, how many of them were teenagers, but I don't feel like sharing this kind of stuff with a group chat is necessary. If you have any sort of obscure interest like that and you are keeping it with adults, you can't just go telling anybody that. And I feel like that is common sense. You know, I'm not going to go out there, hypothetically, telling everyone that I'm interested in seeing Mario and Luigi smooch if I was interested in seeing Mario and Luigi smooch, because I think it's kind of obvious that most people don't ship the Mario brothers together. I mean, I don't, but hypothetically speaking, I feel like there was a lapse in logic and common sense, and then it did not help them that they tried to defend themselves. And it's just a mess. Everything's a mess. And I've struggled so hard to produce this video because I don't want to promote any sort of harassment or abuse towards anyone. And I'm not a pro shipper, and I do not like pro ship content in the slightest. And I don't want to come across that way. I don't want it to come across like I'm supporting that stuff or endorsing that stuff or defending that stuff. But at the same time, I'm not going to use the fear of me being afraid of somebody purposefully misconstruing my attempt to inform. I'm not going to use that fear that I have as a means to not speak up about misinformation, because there was misinformation, and I think that regardless, sending death threats and doxing and labeling people as being child enjoyers or animal enjoyers, I don't think that's okay. I don't think that's ever okay. If you are uncomfortable with that, that is valid. That is so valid. And you have every right to distance yourself from the person, to block the person, to distance yourself from anybody vaguely even involved, because I understand not wanting to touch it with a 10-foot pole, especially if you make content for children, because that definitely puts you in the danger zone. And putting up those boundaries, great. Expressing, trying to explain in an informed manner what this stuff is, great. But going out of your way to accuse these people of being what they're not, in spite of what they may have said, and jumping to conclusions without taking the chance to talk to somebody first, or reading what one person says online and taking it as absolute truth, that is also not okay. No Animal Jam influencer is a reliable source. I wouldn't say that I am a reliable source. I have done a lot of research on this topic. I have watched video essays upon video essays on this topic from both sides. I have watched video essays from pro shippers. I have watched video essays from anti-shippers. I've watched video essays from people who are neither. I have scrolled through Tumblr blogs and TikTok pages and so much. If I had $1 for every time that I've read the pro shipper in this last month, I would not be making YouTube content for money anymore, y'all. I wanted to make sure, because I knew how volatile this topic was, I wanted to be educated, and I wanted to provide you with the most educated lens that I could with the arguments, and I don't really know where I stand on this. I think the best that I can say is death threats bad, doxing bad, but sharing inappropriate with content with minors bad, boundaries good. Thanks for watching, guys. This video has taken me too long to record. It's almost a half hour long, and I know most of this video is just me rambling, because that's what this is. This is a scrambled mess of people trying to make what is a colorful debate of wide opinions where no one person speaks for the entire other group, where there is supposed to be nuance and discussion and debate, and turning it into a black and white argument of either you're with us or you're against us, you are virtuous or you're a predator, when nothing in life is that black and white. There needs to be nuance in discussion, and that's what I try to do. That's what I tried to do in my video talking about predators and the dark side of the Animal Jam community, and that's what I'm trying to do now. And I know this was a mess. That's why this has taken so many takes. I want just to be clear, I felt this needed to be talked about. I felt this conversation needed nuance, and I did my best. That being said, if you have any of your own opinions on the topic, on either side of the table, feel free to leave your opinions, your experiences, anything in the comments below. All that I ask is that you hold your debates respectfully and responsibly. If you're going to make critiques on what I said, just be respectful. If you're going to have back and forth talking to each other about your own experiences and your own opinions, be respectful, be courteous, and be kind. If anyone is going to go out there openly harassing myself or anybody else, those comments will be removed. And I just, as my audience, I expect the best of you, and I hope you can deliver. And I hope that I have delivered. I've done my best, and thank you all for watching. I'll see y'all around. Hey, Future KijiCon here. About all that. Well, some stuff has come up since I recorded this, and I have taken dozens and dozens of takes for this video. Hours and hours of recording my vocals for this video, and quite frankly, this previous take was my best one. So I have additional information that I think that I would just like to share now instead of doing this all over again. The person who caused this all to start coming up in the Animal Jam community is essentially, beyond reasonable doubt now, not somebody that is safe to be around. In addition to being openly a pro shipper and having used the pair slogan in their bio, in-game, in a children's game, they have a pride flag for people with paraphilias, which essentially told me that I was likely lied to by them. And so yeah, please don't take this video as me defending or supporting this person. And it may be likely, after speaking to some people who are more educated on this topic than I am, that those pro shippers or reportedly non-pro shippers who may have the pair slogan and the pair emoji in their bio, despite claiming for it to be used as freedom of expression, may just be lying to save face. You never know, and generally I would just advise not to trust everyone that you come across on the internet. And I'd like to make one clarification now that I don't feel like I made earlier. Obviously, I don't speak for everyone, and no anti-shipper speaks for all anti-shippers, and no pro-shipper speaks for all pro-shippers, but what I want to make very clear is that this is a complex situation, and I don't see any sort of resolution coming about anytime soon. Because in the end, this is a conversation about censorship and freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And just as any freedom and any human right or general right, it is a hot topic. And yeah, support victims, y'all. As I did in my last video, I will be including resources in the description. And in addition to resources for those who may be currently at risk or in danger in real life, I will be including resources for identifying pro-shipping emojis, as well as a few additional better worded and more informed video essays on the topic for both sides. And I'll be sharing these videos, though, again, I did not write these videos, I did not produce these videos, so some of these videos may be using more harsh and direct language that I may not use on my channel, so click at your own risk. But in the end, keep yourself safe. You never know who you're engaging with online. And in the end, the main point that I'm trying to put across this whole video is, regardless of what you think, keep this content away from minors. Protect real-life minors, and any sort of these sort of philias in real life are disgusting, deplorable. Seek help. If you see anything illegal happening, report it to the authorities, and keep yourself, your audience, and your friends safe. Thank you guys for watching.